chat. Today we have a very exciting topic and interesting one, which is the question that everyone always think about. Oh, most people do anyway. It is the question where we ask, do I matter? Now, the key word here is I. So that means you're thinking about yourself. Now, why do we think about this question? Now, I was been looking about it and trying to figure out why do people tend to think this matter? Well, usually when people come up with this question, it means they are very sad or they're lonely. So it comes to this question that I want to ask, which is we people tend to look for validation, significance, and purpose. Because of this, we ask the question, do I matter? And we tend to find out the value, our own value to this world itself. So is it important to understand our value? So it comes to thinking about our self worth. And because of this, we tend to do a lot of interesting things or some bad things in our life. Well, today we have a guest. I think Mark is here already. So we'd like to welcome Mark to the show and we'll talk about Do I Matter? Hello, Mark. Welcome to the show.
Hi there. Nice to see you.
And you hear me? Oh, there's a little bit of audio problem here. Let me try it again. I can't hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Okay. Okay. I, can you? All right. Would you like to say something so I can hear you?
Let's see. Check, check. 1, 2, 3, 4,
Ah,
5, 6, 7, 8, 9,
it's
10.
not working.
Hello, hello. It's not working.
But you can hear me, right? For sure.
Yes, I can. Yep.
Oh, there we go.
There we
You hear me
go.
now? Yeah.
Glad we figured that out.
All right. Well, welcome to the show, Mark.
Thank you. Hi. Nice to see you.
Well, I haven't get a chance to introduce you to everyone else. So, everyone, this is Mark Hennick. He is an author of the book So Called Normal, and it's a memoir of family, depression, and resilience. And he also did a talk on TEDx talk, and in Canada, I believe it was called "Why We Choose Suicides." And I actually get the chance to watch this talk couple years ago, and I was like, "Wow, this is cool!" And then when Mark approached me, I'm like, "Wow, this is him. This is the show. This is the guy, right?" So, welcome, Mark.
Thank you so much for having me on. It's such a pleasure that I get to speak about, my recovery journey and to connect with so many other people who share their own vulnerability. I think for the benefit of others.
It's difficult, right? At that time, you were about how old were you? 16, I would say, right? Was it 16?
So in that TED Talk, which now actually it's over 10 years old now, which blows my mind because it was such a big and continues to be such a big part of my life. But in that TED Talk, I told two stories. One of them was one of my earliest, if not my first, times expressing that I was suicidal. Even though I had been depressed probably for a couple of years before that. So I would have been 12 when I was first detected to be suicidal. And then the second story I told was sort of as a way to bookend it, how the progression in the mind of somebody who is struggling with depression goes, and it ended up being my last suicide attempt. So that's what I wanted to accomplish with that talk, was to show how somebody descends through the stages or the levels of mental illness and what that looks like from the inside.
And that's also a little bit interesting as well, because most people don't actually understand that um, suicidal or depression actually happens at a young age as well. And most
Mhm.
people think it just happens when they're older or probably during their midlife crisis or something like that. But I believe it happens to the best of us, even when we're young, no matter how old we are. It's just how we navigate through life. Um,
Yeah. Yeah, it really does. And suicidal ideation and attempts and completions, for that matter, have been known to occur throughout the lifespan. But the two biggest cohorts of people, for sure, are
mm,
teenage boys, 16 to 24-year-olds typically. But it even happens younger than that, certainly. But then the biggest group tend to be middle-aged men. And there are various times throughout the year and in somebody's life when suicide tends to spike. For example, springtime, right around now, actually, April tends to be one of the worst times. People's birthdays tend to be times when they consider suicide more in this idea of sort of a birthday depression. So transition moments, I think, that's really what these times are. Adolescence is a time of transition. Midlife is a time of transition. So I think that really tells us that we as a species don't love change. And if we want to get better, if we want to grow and become more resilient, then we have to realize that change is the norm, change is the world. That's what
Mhm.
defines life.
I think at the same time, because we think, well, I believe some ways we humans tend to like, well, humans want to be validated and we always want to belong somewhere. So no matter what age we are, we tend to seek things that excite us or things that we feel that we are welcome in this society or something. And when things doesn't go that the way we want it, and it just keeps happening in a row, it just makes people think that what's the point of this? If something happened to me today and tomorrow another bad thing happened, and the day next day after it same thing continues, and it tends to make you think like, why does it matter? Do I really need
Yeah.
this, right? Like some days, for example, if I go to work, have a bad day at work, and I go home and more bad things happen, like, what's the point of working? And I come home to supposed to have a great day, and bad things happen at home. It's like, oh. So, and then I start to think, why do I even bother working, or why
Yeah.
do I even bother going home? So I tend to
Yeah.
think this way as well sometimes. And I feel like there are men out there or women out there as well who sometimes go to work and get stressed from work. And when they go home, they get stressed at home and they feel like there's no way to go.
Yeah.
And
Why do I bother?
hey, why do I
And
bother?
that what you mentioned about men and women too. I mentioned that the two biggest groups tend to be teenage boys and middle aged men, but certainly women die by suicide as well. And in fact, women attempt suicide much more frequently than men do. Men die much more frequently, and the theory behind, or one of the theories behind that, is that men tend to use more lethal means, and that's part of how
Mm,
we've been culturized and masculinized, to be bigger and louder in everything. And obviously that's a problem, but also that it's not okay for men to talk about their feelings and about their struggle. They're supposed to be stoic and suck it up and be okay all the
right,
time,
right, yeah.
when of course that isn't how it really works. But you said something else there that I think was really interesting about this idea of feeling hopeless and helpless. Like, why
Mm,
bother? Why am I doing this? I think that's actually, I certainly got stuck in that place back when I was a teenager. Why nothing will ever get better and there's nothing I can do about it. That's sort of the toxic mixture there. But one of the things that really helped me was later on this sort of existentialist perspective that, and this might sound kind of dark, and I don't intend it to be because it's actually quite hopeful to me, is that of course life doesn't mean anything. Nothing means anything. That's actually really freeing. It doesn't
mm,
need to mean anything. You can make it mean whatever you want it to mean. And
mm,
that's one of the traps I think that we get caught in, is that we're out there looking for our purpose as though
mm,
we're lost it on the side of the road and we're
mm,
just going to stumble upon our purpose. And that's not how life works. You build your purpose, you
mm,
write your own story, and you get to edit it as you go along as well.
mm.
So life can mean whatever the hell you want it to mean. And I
For
think
sure, yeah.
that's incredibly freeing.
And sometimes we limit ourselves to a lot of things. Like recently I had a talk with a young lady. She's probably around 29 years old, I guess. And she's been looking for a partner for a long time, and she says she's getting stressed from her family, stressed from her friends. She's seeing her friends are all getting married, having children, and she's still a single person. And she asked me, it's like, why is that? I was like, well, what are you doing specifically? She says, well, I'm going to parties, I'm going out to meet with friends and stuff like that. Well, I asked her, well, what are you doing with your life? What is your purpose? Like, what is your job? What do you want to do? And then I realized that all she has been doing is pretty much just, going to work and hanging out with friends and trying to get a partner. At the same time, she feels depressed from it because she couldn't find the one she wants. And I told
Hmm.
her the thing that I try to apply to my life is what she's thinking right now is she's trying to find something where else she should have worked on herself. So I told her, you need to work on
Absolutely.
yourself. Think about what you want in your career and what you want to get in the future in your career. make yourself better. And when this happens, people will get attracted to you, and you will find the right person. And I also mentioned that if she keeps looking, she might find the wrong person, and the wrong person will make things worse for her, probably, right?
Yeah,
So
when we get so heady about things and we try to hyper control and over fixate on things, we often get what we think we want, but then we realize very quickly that what we thought we want isn't what we want at all, that
right,
you're
right.
suddenly not happy. And that's a common pitfall, I think, of this striving sort of culture of doing all the things we think we're supposed to do based on our culture or what our parents told us or what social media has led us to believe, and it's empty. There's nothing there. There's no there there. I think instead your advice to that person was spot on, that if you want to be loved, then you have to first learn how to love. You have
Mm,
to love yourself. You have to repair your relationships within yourself. And that's what opens you up to the love in the world around you, I think. That's not the kind of thing you can force. In fact, when the tighter you grasp at what you want, the harder it pushes it away, I think. It shuts
yeah,
you down. So open yourself up by loving yourself.
that right. Recently I've seen my son, right? He's been posting up some posts online as well, on Facebook or threads recently, and he's having a bad day. And as a father, it's kind of troublesome for me to see this kind of messages like, oh, it's kind of bad, so what can I say to him? I mean, if I talk to him directly, he would not, obviously would not listen to me, rebel against me.
Sure.
So I send him a message and say, life is tough, it's going to happen, just keep on going, push yourself, and then things are going to get better. And I
Yeah.
think so in this way. But sometimes I feel like, yeah, life is really tough. You don't see the end of the tunnel sometimes. Sometimes you just keep getting hit and hit and hit and hit and hit, right? So we don't know what's going to happen. But it's more like if we build on consistency that you're thinking that something is going to happen or something's going to happen better in your life, I think this way it makes us keep going because we don't know what we're going to get in the end. So we just have to keep pushing.
That's it. And I think that comes partly with letting go of this idea that your life is supposed to be in any particular way or it's supposed to look a particular way. Let yourself be surprised by your life. Let every day be an adventure. I think that's the way that we can help to unlock some of that joy. And, I distinctly remember being a young person as well when I was struggling at that time, and feeling like I was just trapped inside my mind. And that was really, the TED talk was, it was a story about myself, but really kind of the subtext behind it, or the point that I was trying to get to, was that when you're in that sort of space in your mind, when you go on that trip, you get trapped in it and you can't see outside it very often. You don't know the trip when you're on the trip. You only see that later after you finish it and look
Mm,
back. But when you're in it, it almost collapses and it can be suffocating and isolating when you're inside that place. So that's why I always tell people, never make critical decisions about your life on your worst days when you're in
mm,
these dark, difficult places. Just wait. And sometimes it's going to suck. It's really going to be hard. And that's okay. The psychoanalyst Anna Freud, Sigmund's daughter, once famously said, "Who promised you that life would be easy? That was never part of the original deal. That's okay. That's just how it is. You can do hard things. And in fact, that's how you build resilience. You don't build resilience by always flying high, always being up here. You build it by bouncing back over and over and over again. And eventually, you get pretty good at it. I
mm.
remember thinking that I had been depressed for so long, I had relapsed so many times, that eventually, when I would start to relapse, I would think to myself, I've gotten really good at being depressed. I kind of know the ropes here. I know that it's going to be okay. So that's part of it too, is being a little bit playful with yourself and separating yourself from the struggle, so that you're able to say when the depression comes, and it will from time to time. You're able to say, "Whoa, look at that depression. That's a big one coming. This is going to be really
Mm,
hard, but it's
mm.
going to pass too. This too shall pass."
It's just I like you gave a lot of ideas and a lot of advices as well. For young people out there, usually they don't see that though, so that's a bit of trouble.
No.
Like when I was young, I don't even see that as well. And sometimes, I feel like there's no one to talk to. right?
Yeah.
And it's very difficult if you start to talk to someone and you feel like they're start to judge you, and then you feel like, oh, what's going on, and then, you know, yeah, it leads to suicidal thoughts, and it's
Hmm.
terrible. Um, I I would say about probably about, I don't know, 7 8 years ago, when my dad passed away, and my life kind of like, rocked a little bit, and it was kind of hard to get back to it, and it was like, oh, what's the point of living in the first place? And then things are getting worse and worse. My job didn't do so well, um, and family is kind of like, oh, and I feel like everyone's very judgmental. So pretty much every day for, I think, for about 5 years, I've been thinking about, suicidal thoughts, things like that. But because I'm an educator, I'm a teacher, I don't show it to my students. I try to
Hmm.
show it at all. But when I come home or when I go to sleep, when I go take a shower or whatever, these thoughts keep coming back in. And I need to figure out how to, well, this is explains why I found your video. And so your TED Talk. But all this is more like trying to find how I can get away from this.
Yeah.
Therapy doesn't really help in some ways, because I sometimes it makes you feel like you're being judged in some ways. And so trying to find the right therapist is actually very helpful, and or finding the right person to talk to, or a friend to actually help you along, can help you feel like you actually matter sometimes. And which is
Mm.
why I tell my students or my kids as well, sometimes it is, you are to me, you are my son. I hope you guys will learn something from life. If there's something bad, I will be there to help you in as much as I can, because as a father, that's my job. If I can help you, I'll help you while I'm still here. And I also mention sometimes to my children that they need to figure out what they want to do in their life. While they're figuring out,
Mhm.
while I'm still here, I can provide the means for you. But once I'm gone, I don't know what I can do. And so it's very difficult for young people to hear that as well. See, because if your dad comes to tell you, oh, he's gonna die soon or something, and just like, what. And so I tend to think a little bit different, and therefore, so sometimes now I came up with this, well, this is my channel, and trying to put some more motivational things out there, because there's
Mhm.
so little motivation out there, and people look for answers sometimes, and there's so little of it, there's not a lot of it. And
Yeah.
sometimes the information we get are not good enough. It makes you think even worse, right? And so, yeah, well, I think I talked too much.
There's no, no, it's good, and you know what? There's so much packed into what you just said. There's so many issues in there. One of them is that I detected was on um, who you share your story with and how you share it. You
Mm,
know, um, it's important to think about that, whether you're a person who needs help, and we all need help, or you're a person who wants to help others. But I think that recognizing why you're sharing your story is the first step, if you're doing it for yourself or you're doing it for others. And that really speaks to working with your students as well. Of course, you wouldn't stand in front of your classroom and say, I'm suicidal and I don't know what to do, because that wouldn't be an appropriate venue to do that. It doesn't have any learning sort of goal for it. What you then need to do is to work on yourself. And that's where a therapist can be helpful in some respects, in terms of learning skills. But also remember, too, suicidality is, and these sorts of thoughts, they come from somewhere deeper, I think, inside of us than our thinking mind.
mm,
If we thought very rationally, then of course we wouldn't think about ending our lives. But those thoughts creep in there anyway. So one of the things that I've found, especially when I was in that transitional period of not being super depressed and suicidal all the time, but also not being pretty, as I am now, stable and well, most, if not all of the time. But there's that space in between where the thoughts would still creep back in, or you'd have more frequent relapses. I think the key there, again, is not to cling to them, to watch them as clouds go by. I think so often, and I learned this from my mindfulness practice, so often we see a scary thought come into our mind, or we have an upsetting feeling, or somebody says something or does something to us, and our mind and our focus just zooms onto it, and it just grabs onto it and it won't let it go. And then we ruminate over it. Why did I think about that? I'm a bad person. I can't get past this. This is so terrible. Let go of all those judgments. All that judging thinking is doing is keeping the thought close to you. Instead, you can say to yourself, that was an interesting thought. There's that suicidal thought again. There's that wish that I wasn't here, whatever. That's okay. You can greet it, hold it lightly, acknowledge it, validate it, but then also let it float away as well. That's okay too. I think we get so wrapped up in our thoughts and our feelings that we clog our own mind. It just gets so clogged up with this negative stuff because we hold on to it all. When in reality, thoughts and feelings are valid, but they're just data points. They're just little data points along the way. They don't have to mean anything at all. Our brain does all sorts of things, somewhat
Mm,
randomly, somewhat, just kind of all over the place sometimes. We don't have to give everything a story that it doesn't necessarily have to have. So, that's how I've navigated those kinds of situations with those intrusive thoughts. Just recognize and validate them, but let them go too. Don't cling to them. They don't want to stay with you either.
that's right. Yeah. So, oh, there's too many negatives. Like every time, every day we think about it. Sometimes, like you said, you can turn it to data. It'll be, just it's just gonna pass through. It's just an experience. Like my son recently had a breakup once recently, and he took it pretty okay. And
Mhm.
some of my students actually, there's actually one of my student recently. He just broke up with his girlfriend, and I asked him why, and he could handle it properly. He's fine with it, but his girlfriend is kind of having a breakdown over there. And so I'm like, you should talk to her, and like explain to her why you're breaking up with her. And I know the reason why he broke up with her. It wasn't because he doesn't like her. It was because his teacher suddenly says you need to break up, so you guys shouldn't have a relationship at all. And I was like, well, you guys need to have a discussion about it, and before things get worse. But at the same time, she gets all the negative things from her friends and saying,
Mm,
this is bad. He's a bad boy. You should have all kinds of bad things. And this doesn't really help the person. And like you
sure.
mentioned, right? So I keep telling her, I told him, this is all just an experience. And I went and talked to her as well. I told her, this is just an experience that you're going through. You're going to learn from this and your life is going to be better. But right now, you
Mm.
don't see it yet. So maybe a couple years later or a couple months later, you will see things differently. And I told her, look at me now. I'm 40 something years old. Do you think I never had a breakup before? I had breakups before. And this is right now, I see it as an experience that has happened. But obviously, at that time, you'd be crying, bawling your
Sure.
eyes out, and so on. This is
Yep. You know,
why sometimes I feel like when I need to take my family to go to the ocean side, to go to the beach and see the ocean and realize yourself that world is much bigger than you. There's more problems in the world than just you. At the same time, you get all these things, you feel more relaxed. So,
Yeah, that piece is, I think, really important because it's not something that I didn't learn much later, and the perspective that you're talking about, it comes with age. Hopefully, I don't think everybody ages and gains in perspective of the world, but it does help. But I remember when I was a kid, even laying out in the grass and just looking at the night sky. I lived out in the country and just feeling my own smallness, but not in a bad way. Because when you're depressed, you feel small and insignificant. But
mm,
when you're laying out under a blanket of stars, you feel small and insignificant. And it's a
right.
beautiful thing instead of an oppressive thing. And I think that really helps to give some perspective on these kinds of issues as well. But also what you mentioned with other people and going through breakups and the sort of idiosyncrasies of relationships. I wish I had learned earlier on that other people are just as entitled to their story as I am to mine. And that we're like little bubbles that sometimes bump into each other, but we
Mm,
all have our own world. We're all the hero of our own story, or sometimes the villain of our own story. And that other people are entitled to their struggles, to their suffering, to their interpretations of the world, and they don't necessarily have to impact ours. I mean, they often do. We, of course, all the time change each other's trajectories, but we don't have to always get so wrapped up in other people's struggles and suffering and stories that we lose ourselves. So I think that's really the fine balance here, is to, of course, be empathetic and connected with others and to really be able to enter into other people's stories, but at the same time, without losing our own footing, without losing our own firm footing in
mm.
who we really are. So with the story of your son's breakup, absolutely explaining and recognizing and talking about his boundaries and hers and all of that stuff, being super transparent about it, but at the same time not losing yourself and not compromising your own integrity and your own boundaries and your own story, and letting other people hurt sometimes, because sometimes the only way out is through. The old Winston Churchill quote, or the way that Dante navigated hell was to go through it and find the other side. I think there's a lot of wisdom in that.
Yeah, definitely. And there's also the problem that sometimes, when like you mentioned, everyone has their own life. We're all different characters in their own. We think we are the main character in the whole world, but they are not. People have their own, heroes in their life, and then we tend to force ourselves into their life most of the
Yeah.
time when we are having problems, and we're like, "Oh, you need to do this for me," and I was like, "No, I don't have to," and you're like, "Why?" And then you keep forcing yourself, and things like this happen. You make yourself actually feel worse about it, because that person will start putting walls in front of you and rejecting
Hmm.
you, and then you're like, my friend doesn't like me anymore, and then you're creating more problems for yourself, and it's a bit it's a bit, yeah. So I think it's tough, especially
It
for young
certainly is.
kids.
And especially if you love the person, there's nothing worse than seeing somebody you love going through a really hard time. But you know what? You had to go through hard times too, as did I, and everybody else did. And we can be there for people. We can be in their corner for them. We just can't fight the fight for them, because they have their own mind and they need to learn some of those lessons too. And we can be there to support them and to help them back up when they fall, but we can't be a helicopter for our kids and just float them over every adversity of life. I really do think that adversity does build character. It builds resilience. Now, we do need to do a good job and a better job of protecting people from trauma. I think that our world is unnecessarily traumatizing for too many people, under this idea that that we all just need to suck it up and be tough. That's not helpful. But I do think that we have to reckon with the difficulty of the world without shutting out the beauty of the world too, because there's always beauty there, even in the difficult places, I think.
And that is interesting. I actually like that as well. But recently, in Taiwan, where I'm living right now, we had a huge earthquake recently. If most people was watching that, you know this. We have a few deaths, and I think close to 19 now, I guess. And it's difficult, and people are like, these things happen, and why they're happening to you, and it makes you feel like, you know there's no hope at the same time, and
Hmm.
you feel like, I'm trying to be happy and something bad even happens. I lost my building, I
Hmm.
lost my house, I lost my family. How can they get over this? And it's speaking about going over the grief part as well. And it's difficult. Like, some of my students ask me about this. When people die, how would you feel? Well, I'll usually tell them that if someone died, and if I'm not really connected to that person, I don't feel so much for that person. But if when you go to the funeral of that particular person who passed away, you will be thinking about someone you are related to had just passed away, and you might feel more emotional about it. But talking about it, you
Hmm.
won't feel anything. And they asked me, how do you overcome it? And I mentioned that there's no way to overcome grief. It's gonna be there.
Hmm.
It's just we have to understand that in life, things happen. And as I get older, most of my friends, or most of the people I know, will eventually go, and I have to accept that. And it makes it
Hmm.
difficult. But if I don't accept it, I'm actually causing more problem for myself. I'll be thinking about, why am I the only one still here, or stuff like that. And it makes, bad things happening in your
Yeah.
head. We don't want that, right? So, uh, kind of like getting rid of negative stuff, or from your head, and the beliefs that you have. And by, what's the negative self-talk, that's the thing.
Hmm.
Self-talk, that's like, we need to get rid of the self-talk thing. And then I keep telling my students as well, no matter what you do, there's chances that you can be successful. Everyone in this class can be successful. It's just whether how you navigate it, and how you figure out what you want. And as a teacher, I'm always here to help you if I can help. I can give you lots of advice, because I've been in this world for many years. All you gotta do is ask for it, right? So I wouldn't force you.
Yes.
You ask for it. Yeah.
Yeah. I had the great privilege of visiting Taiwan once, so my heart really goes out to your beautiful place for what you've been through. But I think you're raising some really important points here too around the adversity that we will inevitably encounter, whether it's through natural disasters or the small tragedies that all of our
Mm,
lives contain. And I always come back to this. Principle from an approach called dialectical behavior therapy. And one
mm,
of the skills that they teach, and DBT is a sort of a mixture between cognitive behavioral therapy, which is very popular in mental
mm,
health treatment and very effective, I should mention, and it combines it with traditional mindfulness practice, Buddhist mindfulness practices. And one of the skills that they teach is called acceptance and change. And it's this idea, and it almost seems like a duality. How can you change something and accept it at the same time? But it really starts with the fact that acceptance doesn't mean endorsement. It doesn't mean that you like it or that you want it to be there or that you're glad it happened. Acceptance just means that you're being realistic. There was an
mm,
earthquake, or this person died, or whatever it is. We can't ignore the bad things that happen in the world. We have to accept that they happened. But then the other piece of it is that we can only change and grow and even find goodness after and love and hope and all those things if we stop denying the things that happen in the world that cause us suffering. So we have to do both. As long as we're pushing away and denying the difficulties that we face, then we'll never be able to change. Then we always stay stuck. So
mm,
that's something that I always come back to is um, not I don't believe that things like that are caused by any kind of supernatural power, although it's a perfectly valid belief if some people do. But I always ask myself, what can this moment teach me? Why has this moment come to me at this time in my life? What can I learn from this? And I think when you have that sort of growth mindset, that learning predisposition, you'll find learning everywhere you go. That inquisitive sort of childlike mind, where what can this moment teach me,
mm.
really shifts your perspective. I think, especially in difficult times.
It's important as well because for students, right, it's more about controlling their emotions, and emotions get the better of us most of the time. And even for older people like me, sometimes I'm emotionally as well, and just sometimes you just have to pose yourself and think about, okay, something's gonna happen if I keep going on. I just need to stop for a second or a minute
Hmm.
or two, and then take a drink or something, and okay, think about it, and then work through it. And most of the
Yeah.
time, I told my students, yeah, we shouldn't worry about spilled milk. It's more about you spill it. Okay, let's just clean it up. Stop thinking whose fault is it. Just pick it up
Yep.
and clean it up, and that's
Just
the
deal
problem.
with it. Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
because if we
That
if
and
we
that that
keep complaining about the spilled milk or the problems, nothing's gonna be fixed. And
that's right.
it's interesting.
All we can do, we can't control the world around us. All we can control is how we react to it, and that's really not just a trite little truism. I mean, it's the only thing we have is ourselves and our own mind. We can't even control the person who's standing right next to us, and the more we try, usually the more friction that it causes. So focus on centering yourself. And if you experience emotion, there's nothing wrong with emotion. I mean, of course, there are different cultural views and practices on this,
Yeah.
but sometimes, for example, if I'm sitting and I'm deep in a meditation, something will just bubble up and I'll become very emotional, and I have to
Mm,
just let that ride it out. Let that wave come and go. That's how life works. Life ebbs and flows, and we have to just sort of um, you can't control the ocean, as John Kabat-Zinn says, but you can learn to surf. And I think that's really profound wisdom.
that is true. And I tell my students it's always about the attitude that you control yourself. Um, just this morning, I had this class and we were talking about how you can react to someone, whether it's good or bad. And I told the student, what do you think? Is our reaction valid when we do something bad to someone? And he said, no. It's like, I don't really care what people do to me if they say bad things or whatever. Nothing's gonna change. I was like, really? And I try to get him to understand a little bit. So let's say if someone points a middle finger at you, two middle fingers or whatever, and how would you respond? And he'd be like, I wouldn't do anything. I would just, let it by. I understand it's just a symbol. Nothing's gonna happen. I was like, really? Yeah. And just as I said that, really, on the opposite of the classroom, there is a girl student. She just stood up and showed a middle finger to him and said something really bad that he didn't like. And immediately he responded with anger. I'm like, whoa, look at that. And the whole class was like, what is going on? For a second there, he just said nothing's gonna happen, but he reacted very strongly.
Sure.
And I let it went on for 3 or 4 sentences, and I said, okay, you guys stop right now. What just happened, guys? You told me that you're not going to respond and everything's going to be fine, but you just showed the opposite of this is technically what human beings are. And I tried to explain to you, we all tend to react immediately all the time. Now, if you would have paused, like I mentioned earlier, and you will understand that she's just trying to bait you. She's not actually doing it to anger you. She's just doing it for fun. And you went in, and so in the same times you created something that's worse. She is not going to feel anything bad, but the person that's going to feel bad is yourself. And he's like, oh man. And the whole class understood that poem, and I was like, wow, this is a great teaching moment for me. I was like, yeah, and it's just, but at the same time it applies to myself as well. I sometimes feel like when I'm driving, it's a car cutting in front of me. I'm like, oh, I feel like I want to
Hmm.
honk or something. But at the same time, I feel like I need to stop for a second and think maybe that person is in a hurry. I'll let them go. Maybe they need to
Yeah.
go to school early or they're late. This stuff does happen to me as well. And when I
And
think that way,
I think having that kind of grace with people around you
mm,
is incredibly helpful too. Is realizing that everybody is going through their own little drama, and I think because of what's called this spotlight effect, we
yeah,
tend to think that people think about us more than they really are. We are a side character in everybody else's little narrative in their own story. They're the star of their own story. They
mm,
probably don't know nothing at all about you. They don't. They might not even care about you, to be honest,
mm,
and that's okay. That's all right. We can let them do that, and we can give them the space to do that. And what you're speaking to here around emotional reactivity, we can modulate that. We don't have to suppress it. We don't have to necessarily falsely deny all of our emotions, but we can also watch our reactivity as well. We're animals. We are basically talking apes, so we're going to react
good
to the
looking apes
world
too.
around. Right? And so we're going to react to the world around us. We're supposed to be. And in
Mm,
fact, actually, clinically, when you're looking at somebody who is pathologically non-reactive, so emotional things happen in the world around them and they're blunted and they don't react to it, that's a problem too, because we're supposed to be responsive to the world. That's normal. However, I think of everything in terms of sort of averages or means. We are supposed to have an appropriate reaction to something and then come back down again to our sort of
mm,
average or set point, our emotional set point. And sometimes we do need to block stuff out and just be, a little unavailable. That's okay too. But then we come back up again to our set point. And I talk about this in my TED talk as well. And I used the traffic example because it's relatable. You feel that swell of emotion inside you. That's supposed to happen, and then it comes back down again. But the difference for people who get stuck in depression is that that emotion comes up, that reactivity comes up or
mm,
down, whichever it is, and then they get stuck there and they can't get back out of it again. They can't get back down to their baseline. I think that's where it becomes a problem, and that sometimes is where you need professional help to either look at the root biological causes that are causing you to be stuck up or down in that under or over reactivity, or much more effectively in most cases, is to get to the bottom of your thinking traps that are keeping you stuck and
mm,
ruminating
mm.
in those places that are either underreactive or overreactive.
It's yeah, but yeah. So everyone, Mark has mentioned a couple of times, and I have mentioned about his TED talk. So please look it up. It's on YouTube, and so it's the topic of the TED talk is called "Why We Choose Suicide," and It's a very interesting topic as well, and so it sounds similar to what I mentioned in today's our topic today, which is "Do I Matter?" Right? But
Mhm.
move a little bit to towards your book, the so-called normal, a memoir of family, right? So I want to understand how you came up with the title, so-called normal.
So, and I don't think you can see it in the side by side, but it's over my shoulder there. But the book, So-Called Normal, a memoir of family depression and resilience. This really germinated from uh, uh, after I had done the TED Talk way back in 2013. Now, I started getting. Oh, there we go. We changed the thing. So
There
there's
you go. Okay,
the
that's the
book
book
cover if you're looking
on
for
the
it.
top left. Yeah.
Yeah, underneath the support tag. So do the support tag too.
Oh,
Um,
let me get
but
rid of that for a second.
but the book
There you
really
go.
came from there it is. Okay, so it's just my face looking over my own shoulder, but it is what it is. Anyway, after I had done the TED Talk, in which I told those two stories about my early suicide attempt and my later one, I started getting messages from people all over the world who did what you said, or suggested that you did, which was that you were looking up suicide. Either some people told me that they were looking up ways to consider suicide. Other people said they were looking up ways for help. They came upon the talk and then they started reaching out to me. And in that talk, I told a story about a stranger who I only knew at the time had a light brown jacket on, who reached out and saved my life, pulled me off of the edge of a bridge during that last suicide attempt. So then these people started telling me that I was like their stranger who had saved them, just somebody who came along in the middle of the night or whenever it was and shared their story, connected with them, and made them feel seen. So, after that happened, I really felt like I needed to better understand my own story. And a few things happened that led up to the writing of the book, which was that I went on social media and traditional media here in Canada, and it turned out going viral all around the world to find that stranger who saved my life. I ended up finding him and thanking him for pulling me off that bridge that night. And then several years after that TED talk, I lost my mother very suddenly. We weren't expecting her to die, but when she did, I felt this incredible motivation. I think as a part of navigating my own grief
Mm,
was to tell my own story from start to finish, but also to tell hers too. Because her and I were very close. We encountered many of the same struggles when I was growing up. And in fact, my struggles caused struggles for her too, and vice versa. Her
mm.
difficulties caused issues for me. So that's really what germinated the book. And then titling it So Called Normal really came after writing the book and thinking about uh, what I really wanted as a young person who was suffering. And I think what I wanted most was just to be normal, just to be like all these other people out there who seem to be so happy and well adjusted, and their lives were all good, and they didn't have depression, and they never thought about suicide because they were normal. And that's what all my doctors and therapists and all these people wanted me to be too, but they kept failing because I went through a dozen different medications and half a dozen different hospitalizations. So I just so desperately wanted to be normal. And then it was much, much later, partly because of the TED talk, I think, when I started hearing from all these people, that I realized, oh, there's no such thing as normal, that I've been chasing this fantasy for all this time. So I think that's what led to the title, was that this so-called normal, this lie that I had been led to believe was out there as some objective to get to. And it turns out we're all just in this world trying our best, struggling together, thinking that other people have it better than we do. And really, we're all just in it together. So that's really where the title of the book came from.
That's a cool way to get the title, and it's true as well because everyone wants to be normal in some ways, and we all look for it, and we feel like other people is doing better than us in most of the days, you know. But what we don't realize is those people that we think are doing better than us, they're actually having trouble as well. They have their own
Mm-hmm.
problems. It might be a little bit different problem, but yeah. What interested in that part of your story? One part of the story is when you said the guy came and pulled you out, right? I really want to know, why did he do it?
Yeah, I mean, I asked myself that question a lot. And at the time that I did the TED talk, I had no idea who this person was. He was just and in fact, to be honest, I didn't even know if he was real, because when you're in that kind of distorted place in your mind, you learn not to trust your thoughts and your memories and your experiences because it's so mixed up, I think, in your
Mm,
head. Um, but when I went on the mission to find this person, I, in very short order, reconnected with him, and I learned that he was just happened to be driving over the bridge
mm,
that night. He was working a night shift. He wasn't an expert. He wasn't a therapist or a doctor or anything, but he worked. He volunteered rather at one of these mentoring type programs with teen kids. So similar to a boys and girls club or a teen mentoring type program. And he'd only been doing that for a couple of months. So when he was talking to me when I was on the edge of the bridge, I didn't really remember a lot of what he said, but it was very casual kind of stuff to get to know me. He asked me about my hobbies and my interests and my passions. He asked me about my friends and things that I loved, my family, my pets. He wasn't asking me about my diagnoses or my medication or what was wrong with me.
mm,
So I think that's really what made the difference for me, was that he was treating me like a so-called normal person, not
mm.
as some crazy person or different person
And probably at the same
or
time, you feel like
scary.
someone cared about you, and it's
Somebody
just
cared about me, exactly, and just saw me as a real human being. So I think that's the lesson that he taught me that night. And after we reconnected and I got to thank him for that, I realized that that's something that everybody can do. That so often we say that that person needs help and they need an expert to help them. And very often that's true. There's a lot that experts can do. But don't underestimate the power of what you as an individual can do simply by seeing people authentically, not by judging them, not by slotting them into some narrow and arbitrary box. Just reach out and treat other people as human beings.
that's right. Sometimes when I do things like this, when I see people around and I help them, is and my children always ask me like, why do I spend my time or waste my effort to go help these people when it's the problem that they created themselves? I'm like, does it matter? I said, does it matter if I whether I help them for my own benefit or not? It's more like I see something, it's there. If I can do something about it, why not do something about it, right?
Why not? And do you think you've never caused yourself any problems? Of course you
Right.
have.
And,
We all do that.
yeah.
So we have to give people grace. We have to give people the benefit of the understanding. And compassion and love are never wasted.
And just 2 weeks ago, this is an interesting one. 2 weeks ago, our school have an exam, right? Examination test, and I was the proctor for it, and I was standing, walking around, making sure students are doing their test. Um, Two students dropped their pen, right? Usually, in these cases in Taiwan, most they will raise their hands and teacher, may I pick up the pencil or something? And the teacher was like, yeah, go pick it up. So in my case, when they raised their hand, I already knew that they dropped their pencil. So I just walked over there and I knelt down and picked up the pencil and gave it to them. They were like, what's going on? Why is this teacher picking up my pencil for me? And another person did the same thing. I picked it up and gave it to him. It was like, wow. So after the test, they came to me, teacher, why did you help me pick up the pencil? Why not? Why not? It's there. But you dirty yourself. You get down and you're a teacher. I was like, does it matter if I'm a teacher or not a teacher? I see something happen. I should pick it up to help. You know,
That's right. You're never too big to help somebody. And
right,
I think the people who encounter the most problems in their life and that cause the most problems for others are the ones who think that they're too good or too big or too important to reach down and help other people. There is the virtue of humbleness, I think,
yeah,
humbleness before yourself and before others is one of the most saving virtues, I think, because we're all on this rock that's hurtling through space together,
right,
and
right,
we're all going
yeah.
to die at some point, so we might as well be good to each other.
Right. That's what I felt right now when you told me the story about that guy who came and helped you. I think he was just like that. He might have a terrible a day or something, and then he see
Sure.
someone that needs help. I was like, I'm just gonna help. It's like he doesn't have to think about himself. He just there's there. He needs help. I'm gonna help you, and so he came and helped you. Not in this. the sense that he's gonna help you because you're gonna give him money or anything, this some kind
Nope.
of reward. No, it's more like he did it because you're right there and he's right there. And I do know this because there's a lot of people who tend to see problems and it's like, oh, it's nothing to do with me, so I rather not touch it and I'll go away. And I remember my dad used to tell me, if you see a problem, it's not yours, avoid it because it's gonna cause you more problems. And in some ways, it's true. But at
Sometimes
the
that's
same
good
time,
advice. Yeah.
yeah. But at the same time, I feel like I'm putting myself into a question where I'm thinking, should I help that person because he's worth it more or not? So it makes me feel like I'm judging someone. I mean,
Yeah.
I like to think in a way where if I can do something to help, no matter what, right? It doesn't matter, no matter what. If I can help, and it's in not in, I'm saying in my benefit, it's more like it's in my free time or it's in it
Hmm.
doesn't harm me in any way, then I would help, right? Because
Absolutely. And
I
I
may
think
need help
also,
one day,
and you very well may. And I think part of that too is that, and I think we know this instinctively when it's happening, but reaching out and helping others within our own capacity, we can't overgive either, because then we fall into compassion fatigue, where you give
Mm,
and give and give and give and you just burn out. I think that's just as bad in some ways, because you're not recognizing your own boundaries. And actually, you might be giving so much as a way of escaping something in yourself. So I think there's probably a whole psychoanalysis to that as well. Um, so recognizing your own boundaries, giving authentically in the moment, but also not letting yourself be taken advantage of either. Because there's lots of people out there in this big bad world who are going to want to take advantage of you.
for
That's
sure,
just,
for
again,
sure.
that comes back to that idea of acceptance. So recognizing that, but also, somebody falls down or somebody trips, and or somebody's on the street, you recognize in that moment that that person is just in an authentic moment of need. And
Exactly.
when that authentic need matches up with our authentic ability to help in the moment, it is very instinctual. I think when that matches up, that's really what gives us that sense of compassion and that sense of
Mm.
duty and love with others in our community.
That's right. Well, to my students out there who are watching this later, I want you to know that this topic, "Do I matter?" actually means to you, because all of us will be thinking at one point in our stage, why are we like this? Why does this thing happen? But I want you to know there are people out there who are willing to help you. The teachers, me for one, right? And there are other ways to get help, and we just have to open our mouth. That's it. Tell people that you need help. People are willing to help. And because not everyone's going to know that you need help. Obviously, some people will realize it and have this some kind of awareness and will help you. But if they don't, just don't be afraid to open up and tell us. Suicide is never the way, even though we think at that moment that is the best that we should do. But for me, after many times that happened, I don't think it's the way. And Mark has mentioned before in his experience of suicide, um, I did as well, but I won't mention my story out because I don't want it to go out. But I do want to say we think about this very often, and we should try to think about in a 5 years time, if I don't do this now, maybe 5 years time something's gonna change. And when you reach that 5 years time, you'll be looking back and say, hey, it's all good now, right? So a good example is look at Mark right now. He's very successful and he has done a lot of things. So Mark, I want to thank you for your time at Just Chat and sharing your beliefs and your advices to all of us. Could you end with a great advice for students out there or young people out there who are going through these problems in their life, or maybe for some older people out there like me who thinks like, do I matter, and what's going on? Should I take the leap? Or things like that. Do you have any advice? Last advice for them?
Well, thank you so much again for having me on here to have this wonderful conversation. And just to add on to the very important wisdom that you just shared with your students, to reach out for help if you are struggling. What I would add to that is that if you reach out and somebody doesn't know how to help you, or they are unwilling to help you, because that realistically is going to happen sometimes. That's
Hmm.
okay. keep looking, because you deserve to be you deserve help. You deserve to be supported through this struggle, and you deserve to live because you matter. This difficulty that you're going through right now, I promise you, it is temporary. Everything that you experience can be material, creative material to do something good with later. So persist. If you don't get your needs met now through the circumstances or the resources you have available to you, wait and work, and it will change. I promise you. Life is change.
That is great. That is amazing. Great ending right there. Well, everyone, we have reached the end of our time. I want to thank you, Mark, again. Please check out his TED Talk on YouTube. Why We Choose Suicide. It's a TED Talk. It's a great TED Talk. You should watch it many times. And check out his book also. You can find it on Amazon.com. I actually looked it up. And you can actually get his book there as well. And I put a link to his website down here and to the to the YouTube site. You can check it out as well. Well, thank you everyone for tonight, and I hope you guys have a great day. And remember to comment if you need any more questions or any more advice that we can help you, or you can private me message me as well or anything. Thank you everyone, and goodbye.
Thank you.